Welcome to Coach Bennett's podcast, where every run has a purpose, where kindness is hardcore, where this is about running, and this is not about running, where every starting line is a finish line in disguise, where rambling still gets you where you need to be, where pineapple will never ruin your pizza, and the sodas, adult and not adult kind, are always cold, and where there is room on the starting line for everybody. I'm Coach Bennett. Thank you for letting me be a part of your day. Let's get started. All right, welcome to episode 58 of Coach Bennett's podcast. This one is called Rest Days. That's right, rest days. And this is an awkward topic for a lot of you. I know that. Some of you are about to get really uncomfortable. You'd think that rest days would be something that every athlete, every runner, every human would love to talk about, would love to get into, and would love to have. But nay, that is not the case. In fact, I find it's the opposite. So many of you have so much difficulty taking a rest day. And not only that, when you actually do take a rest day, you then have so much trouble taking advantage of the rest day. You feel actually like the rest day is taking advantage of you, and we're going to get to that later. So I'm really excited about this episode, and I will call attention to the fact that this was asked by a listener to me to do this episode. So shout out to you. Thank you for calling in. Calling in? What am I, like a radio DJ? You're not calling in. Not yet. Imagine that if you could actually call in and this was like a radio show. That would be awesome. I'd love to do a radio show. I know I'm going off. I know it's a ramble. Get over it. You know me. I know you. Let's just forget all the flirting. You know I ramble sometimes, all right? So I don't need to apologize. And you're not even asking for me to apologize. So now I'm rambling about rambling. Anyway, the point is, I would love to do a radio show. I grew up and the radio was such a big part of my life because I loved music, and not just music. I loved alternative rock music. And the best way to find alternative rock music back then was listening on the radio. And I was very lucky. I grew up on the Jersey Shore, and we had the best modern rock, alternative rock radio station ever. It was FM 106.3 WHTG, modern rock at the Jersey Shore. Woo! I'm telling you, for 6-7 years of my life, it was a lifeline. I mean, that's where I got most of my bands. That's where I found out about concerts taking place. I heard interviews with some of my greatest artists, and I fell in love with a whole bunch of different DJs. It was just the best modern rock at the Jersey Shore, FM 106.3. It doesn't exist anymore. All these great radio stations, they kind of got consolidated, and now they just, I don't know. Anyway, if you have a favorite radio station, let me know. I mean, I'm talking about an actual, like, local radio station, not one where the DJ's coming from 3,000 miles away, which, by the way, no problem with that. Radio's awesome. And I love newspapers, and I love all that old stuff, which shouldn't be considered old. It should just be stuff. But the point is, if you have a favorite radio station that you want to get a shout out to on the podcast, which will probably have no effect on anything, I'll do it. And I'll even do like a midnight radio station host, like, hey, it's the midnight hour with Coach Bennett. Shout out to Deborah from Duluth calling attention to her favorite jazzy station. That's right, 104.1 WKRP. Not in Cincinnati, okay? Not in Cincinnati, though. Anyway, all right, so where was I? Well, right now I'm lost, so let's not talk about me in the present. Let's rewind a little bit. I was talking about rest days and how so many of you have so many issues with rest days. So let me just start right off the bat by telling you one of my truths as a coach, which is great recovery leads to great running. Or you can flip it, because I love flipping things. Great running is dependent on great recovery. And I'll tell you what. You could just use leads. Great recovery leads to great running. Great running is dependent on great recovery. That's almost how you should do it, the leads and the dependent, because they are part of the equation that equals great running, okay? They're part of the equation. There's a lot more that goes to the equation for what equals great running than running plus running. So many athletes think it's running plus running equals great running. And if you want greater running, it's running plus running plus running equals greater running. And if you want to be the best you can be, you want to be an all-time great, it's running plus running plus running times running. No, it's not. Stop it, okay? You may have heard me before that, do you need to do more? The answer is probably yes, if you want to get better. But more doesn't always mean more running. It could be more strength training. It could be more hydration. It could be more sleep. It could be more laughter. It could be all sorts of different mores, just because we are wired in this certain way where we think we just have to do more. And there's a lot of, you see this online and you see it on social media, where you've got these charlatans that come out and say, you should only sleep like 4 hours a night and vacations are for wimps. And, it's just, by the way, these are all turds, okay? They don't know what they're talking about. And the odds are they're really not very successful. But it is a wonderful thing to get to tell people, and I'll tell you why. Because nobody can really do that. Nobody can operate on 4 hours of sleep consistently. No one can have a really happy life and take no time off, have no downtime, have no vacations, have no relationships. These clowns get to say this to you because you will never achieve it. Therefore, they can then blame you and say, you need to do more, or you're not following the instructions because didn't you have fun on Thursday? And what did I tell you? If you're having fun, you're not being serious enough. And then they get people to think they're the problem and not these clowns are the problem. The clowns are the problem, all right? So I just wanted to sneak that in there. Anyway, this is my roundabout way of saying rest days are super important. Super important, because it's not just about stacking up work. It's not just about stacking up meters, minutes, miles, intensity. It's just as important to know when to push, which again is the thing that we always highlight and put an exclamation point on and have posters about and celebrate people that push and have great drive and incredible work ethic. And I celebrate all that. I get it. But if you dig a little deeper, what you're going to realize is the people that are consistently great, the people who reach levels of excellence that is not just one-off or for a week or a month, but it's long-term, they have to take care of themselves in order to be able to push themselves. They also need to know when to pull back and not just push forward. They're going to need to know when to maintain instead of pick up, or back off instead of speed up. It takes strength to do the right thing, period. I'll say that again. It takes strength to do the right thing, period. So, if the right thing is to take a rest day, recover, relax, back off, then that takes strength and should be applauded. And I'll tell you what, if it takes strength and you can do it, that means you're strong, right? Okay, so if doing the right thing is resting, recovering, healing, then that means you are strong for doing that instead of weak for doing that. So that's why it makes no sense when people come out there and go, sleep is for the weak. Oh, jeez. You know why you don't hear too much after that? Because they fell asleep. All right, so let's get into kind of a normal week, and we'll focus around running, but obviously this is about running, and this is most definitely, absolutely, positively not just about running. But I'm sure you knew that anyway. So over the course of a week, let's just imagine you're running 7 days a week. Let's just do it Maybe some of you are. I imagine most of you are not. That's fine. You run the amount of days you can. You run the amount of meters you can. You run the amount of minutes you can. You run the amount of miles you can. And you will achieve what you can. There's something to remember, okay? So this isn't about what you're not doing. It's about focusing what you are doing. But my point here is, let's imagine you're running 7 days a week. Now, most people who run 7 days a week, they're usually training for something. That's great. It's probably 2 speed runs a week. There's a long run, and then there's 4 recovery runs, right? So you got 4 recovery runs, 2 speed runs, and a long run. That's just the life, let's say, of like a professional runner. Someone who is trying to compete at the fastest levels, the elite level of track and field, okay? Now, this 7-day-a-week schedule, 4 recovery runs, 2 speed runs, 1 long run, that's pretty intense. Now, that's why you have 4 recovery runs in there. It's why you don't have 4 speed runs or 4 long runs. You can't do that. Now, if you break it down even to like a certain day, let's talk about like a speed run day. Now, that athlete may be doing, 12 by 400 meters. Now, when they do 12 by 400 meters, do they run 3,600 meters in a row at the pace that they're going for? Let's say they're doing 12 by 400 at 5K pace. I'm making it up. Who cares? Do they then go out and run 3,600 meters at 5K pace? No, they're doing intervals. They do a 400, and then there's what? What happens before they run another 400 at 5K pace? What do we call that interval? We call it recovery. Some even call it rest. Now, why is that? Well, because the purpose of the workout is not to go and run 3,600 meters at 5K pace. The point is to run 12 by 400 at 5K pace. The difference between 3,600 meters at 5K pace and 12 by 400 at 5K pace is the rest and recovery. And from a coaching perspective, we're trying to get a certain quality and a certain effort to fit a certain purpose with our workout, which is why we say we're going to do 1 lap on the track or 400 meters on a trail or a road, and then we're going to break. We're going to recover. We're going to rest. And then we'll be ready to take on another interval. And when we take on that next interval, that next running interval, we are at a certain stage in our recovery and our development and our frame of mind, mindset, the whole thing, to do what we need to do next at a certain effort, at a certain pace, for a certain duration. So we set it up where we have running and we have recovery. When we do a recovery day, we say, let's run for 10K or 12K or 15K or 5K. It doesn't matter. Why don't you go further? I guess that's the question I would ask to the person online saying sleep is for the weak or something like that, or, taking breaks is wimpy. So when you're doing a recovery run, and I say to you, okay, based on your fitness and our goals and where we're at, I want you to run 10K today. Well, why don't you run 20K? You'd say, well, because that would be too much. Well, why? Why would that be too much? Well, because that would be too much of an effort. Too much effort for what? Well, because tomorrow you want me to run a speed run, right? I do. Well, if I do 20K instead of 10K, I'm going to be too tired to do the speed run. Now, I'm throwing a lot at you right now, but if you actually stop and think about it, it makes sense. You know this. No one complains about that. Like, why can't I do speed runs every single day? Nobody says that. Why can't I run a long run every single day? Nobody says that. From beginners, they would know something's wrong to do a speed workout every single day, to the greatest runners on the planet would never, ever, ever do a speed run every single day. They know that we have to build in types of recovery, which means many different things. It could mean backing off in the distance, duration, intensity, pace of a run to make it become a recovery run, right? I mean, that's what we do. Or if we're going to do a long run, let's say tomorrow, what would we do today in anticipation of that? Well, we would do a couple things. One, we would probably do a recovery run. We would not do an over-distance recovery run. We would also make sure not to stress ourselves in a lot of different ways, because we have to expend a great deal of energy tomorrow on our long run. We would also make sure we get adequate rest, meaning sleep, we'd probably be paying special attention, extra attention, more attention to what we're fueling and feeding our body. We would do all of this in anticipation of this work. But when we tell someone to take a full rest day, all we're really doing with a rest day is extending out the duration of recovery we're already taking. Like I said, after that recovery run, that's 10K and not 20K or 50K or 100K or 150K, what are you doing? You're recovering from the run. The second a run ends, you're recovering from that run and recovering in anticipation of a future run. All a rest day is extending the amount of time, the duration of that recovery, which means it should be there for a reason. So if a coach is telling you, I want you to take Thursday off, the coach isn't saying, I want you to take Thursday off because you're a wimp. The coach is not saying, I want you to take a full rest day, meaning no running, no training, because I think you're soft. What the coach is saying is, I want this extended recovery so when you get back to the line, like in between intervals on a speed run day, you are the best version of yourself to take on what I have next. That is the purpose of a rest day. It's not punishment. It's not proof of weakness. It's a part of training, an essential, important part of training. So why do we struggle so much with taking rest days? Why do we think we're falling behind when we take a rest day? Yet athletes don't think they're falling behind when they take the minute rest in between 400s on a speed run day. Athletes don't think they're falling behind when they spend, 12 to 16 to 24 hours between runs not running. But if you're told to take an extra 24 hours beyond those 12, 16, or 24 hours, suddenly it's, I'm falling behind. As opposed to maybe I'm refreshing. Maybe I'm resetting. Maybe I am coming back better, stronger, more capable. Maybe I needed extra time to soak up all the work that I've been doing. And if I do more work, I will be unable to soak up the work I'm doing. I will block the ability to take in all of the work I've been doing. Because that's what happens. I like to equate it to like cooking. Like you can choose what you're cooking. It doesn't matter. Some of you in your head, you're going to be cooking a steak. Some may be cooking chicken. Some may be cooking pasta. It doesn't matter. You decide what you're cooking. You get to a point where it's not cooked. So cooking is making the food better, right? The meat's no longer raw. The pasta's no longer hard. You're cooking it. And as you cook more, it's getting better and better. It's getting to a stage where it's just about perfect, right? Great. Now, you don't then say this progression will continue forever. Believe me, I've overcooked pasta, and it turns into like a gelatinous paste, and it's disgusting, and it's awful, and I'll tell you what, no one in my family appreciates it when I overcook the pasta. It's the same thing with the steak or the chicken, if that's what you're into. Eventually, it just turns into like a charcoal brick. It's no longer good, tasty, delicious, and I'll tell you what, it ceases to be nutritious. You have now cooked out of the dish everything that's good about the dish. The taste, the nutritional value, even how it looks. It's the same thing with your training. Too much training is too much training. This isn't rocket science. It's not difficult. Eventually, too much is too much because too much is too much. There's no way around it. But a lot of people look at that rest day as too little as opposed to exactly what's needed. It's there as a buffer so your training doesn't become too much. That's why those rest days are in there. Just like the rest is there on interval days. Just like you turn the oven off before you destroy the meal. Don't destroy the meal. And yes, in this metaphor, you're the meal. Don't ruin it. If you do this the right way, you're going to be tasty and nutritious. You're going to be fantastic. You're going to look great too. There's going to be some garnish on there and a little pizzazz. You do what you want to do with your own dish. You know what I mean? This menu is exciting is what I'm trying to say. So just pay attention that rest does not mean lazy. Rest is activity. That's why I want you to start looking at rest days. Rest days does not mean a day off from everything. It just means the focus is on rest. And I'll tell you what, rest is activity. Because to me, the 4 big things with rest are sleep, stress, fluids, and fuel. All right? Sleep, stress, fluids, and fuel. Sleeping is an activity. Sleeping is not lazy. Sleeping is when you heal at your best. It's when you recover at your best. Anyone that tells you you're sleeping your life away, they're morons. Now, yes, there's excessive amounts of sleeping, don't get me wrong. But if you want to live your best life, you need to sleep the best you can, when you can. That's what I'm talking about. Now, I think I did an episode on sleeping. At 58, that's me clapping for the 58. At 58, you start to lose track of what you've done an episode on and what you haven't done an episode on. I'm pretty sure I've done an episode on sleeping. I know I've written a Coach Bennett's newsletter about sleeping. And what I talk about in there is not just to make sure you don't get panicked, because a lot of people, when you bring up sleep, they're like, here we go. He's going to tell me I got to sleep like 9, 10, or 11 hours. I'm not. I don't even tell you how many hours to sleep, because I know a lot of people don't have as much control as, certain magazines would like them to believe over how much they get to sleep. People have jobs, they've got responsibilities, they have families, they have all sorts of things that they have to do. So what I try to do in that episode of the podcast, assuming I've done it, and the newsletter, is just try to help you get the best sleep you can with the sleep you can get. And on your rest days, that's when you look at your sleeping and say, I'm going to set myself up for success by setting myself up for a successful sleep. That's activity. That's active recovery. Dealing with stress. That's another thing you can do to aid rest. That takes work. Living a stress-free life, I understand it. When you think about that, you think of somebody probably in a mansion on the beach and they have no care in the world. Well, that's basically a fantasy for all of us. What I'm talking about is actively working to deal with better the stress in your life. How can you do that? I'll give you an example. If you're someone who in your downtime spends a lot of time getting very angry on social media at people and, responding with, to vitriol with vitriol, and that's adding stress in your life. What are you doing there? That's an easy win. There's no reason to argue with trolls at all. They're underneath the bridge. They want to mess with you. Just cross the bridge and go to where you want to go. That troll lives under a bridge. You're on your way somewhere. You know what I mean? Hopefully your bed, or to a nice meal, or to grab that glass of water. But why are you stopping on the bridge to argue with a troll? I don't understand it. You're not here to hang out on a bridge. If the troll wasn't there, you'd walk right across the bridge. So now you're walking across the bridge and some jackass starts talking trash and you're like, I'm going to stop what I'm doing. I'm going to take time out of the finite amount of time I got to argue with a troll. The troll who feeds off this, who loves this, who does not get stressed by this, wants you on that bridge, when all you could do is ignore and walk across the bridge and keep going. And I'll tell you what, the troll, that's the worst possible thing for a troll, to be ignored, because they get oxygen from your attention. So if you starve them of that attention, well, Next time you go over the bridge, the troll may not be there, is all I'm saying. It will probably stink, though, for a little while. But then you could look at it as like this kind of like circle of life thing. But then the troll goes into like the ground and maybe like there's a rose bush underneath. How pretty would that be in this fairy tale? Anyway, so dealing with stress. And I think I go over that in a couple of podcasts as well, as how to deal with stress. But that's something that's really powerful and something you can look at on a rest day and say, hey, I'm going to focus on getting good sleep. I'm going to focus and work on dealing with stress in a more positive way. That's, again, activity. There's nothing lazy about that. Okay, fluids and fuel. That's next. Now, how exciting is that? Because that's eating and drinking. And I love to eat. I love to drink. Now, when you're focusing on rest on a rest day, this is where you're going to look at your fuel and your fluids and say, I'm going to bring in as much of the good stuff as I possibly can. I'm going to fuel this most extraordinary machine so it can take me to extraordinary places. I'm going to grease those wheels with fluids that are going to let me rock and roll. I am going to deal with hydration by staying hydrated. And I'm going to make sure I have the sustenance to sustain this most excellent lifestyle that I am trying to live. This, again, takes action, demands action from you. You have to set yourself up to have the fuel and the fluids there for you. You have to make the meals, drink the drinks. You have to do these things. And these are not flippant things. When I say, you get your fuel and you got your fluids, a lot of people are like, okay. Well, that doesn't always happen. And if you want to take full advantage of a rest day, it's going to take a little work to set yourself up to have the food, the snacks, the delicacies that you enjoy. Because I'll tell you what, part of fueling is enjoyment, all right? Don't just look at what you're taking in as this is stuff that, has to be metabolized at this. Oh, stop it. Like, enjoy what you're eating and you will eat what you need. So once again, when I'm talking about like what you really need to fill up a rest day, which, like I said, sleep, stress, fluids, and fuel, this is not a lazy day. And yet, for some reason, we consider rest days lazy. Nothing I've brought up brings to mind lazy for me. In fact, it's the opposite. A truly great rest day involves all the antonyms of lazy, like words like lively, interested, caring, active, attentive. These are the things you want to fill up your rest day, because resting is about recovering, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, mindfully. So when you look at the antonyms of lazy, which I think is great, and there are things in there like caring, active, attentive, interested, lively, think about the things that make you feel alive, that remind you that you have passions, that you care about things. There are things that you're interested in, books, movies, TV shows, music, the people in your lives, great conversations, sightseeing. These are the types of things that on a rest day you want to be doing. I'll tell you what, your rest days suddenly seem really busy. They don't sound lazy to me. Reading a book, writing, having great conversations with family and friends, making sure you're getting a great sleep, dealing with stress, making sure your food, your drink, your fluids, your fuel are there for you when you need them. Making sure you are resting is an activity. It is a part of your training, and not just your training for running, your training for life. So it's important to remember that rest does not equate with laziness at all. It's funny, other sports handle this much, much better. You may have heard workload issues at the professional sports level where athletes are taking certain games off. They're making sure that they're getting rested adequately. Running, we punish rest and recovery. It feels like we do. Maybe we can make a turn on this. Maybe we can start here and we can really start celebrating great rest and great recovery. Because if we do that, I bet we're going to be following that pretty closely with celebrating some great performances, some great runs, some great racing, some great training, and really some great living. I think that's what's important. Because like I said, running does not equal success in running. It's training, which is running plus strength training, running plus mindset work. It's running plus. That's what I'm going to consider training. Plus recovery. And recovery is recovery/rest. Sometimes it's active recovery. Sometimes it's, like I said, I don't think you can call sleeping inactive recovery. I think it's active recovery. And then I think that other, ingredient on the side there is joy. When you're exhausted for the wrong reasons, when you're burnt out mentally or physically, it's really hard to be joyful. When you have seemingly no energy left, nothing left to give, it's hard to take up the verb form of joy, rejoice. It's really difficult because you just don't have the energy. Like I said, it takes energy to set yourself up to sleep well. It takes energy to set yourself up to deal with stress. It takes energy to make sure you're taking in the right fluids and fuel. And it takes energy to rejoice. It takes energy to love. It takes energy to be excited, to be happy, to take on challenges, to be a part of a community. And all of these things aid in recovery. And one of the things that aids in recovery is rest. So when you're taking a rest day, celebrate the fact that you're doing work to get better. When you're having a rest day, make sure you are celebrating the fact that you are doing something valuable, powerful in the training plan. Look at a rest day as training. Look at it as a part of your running. Just like you look at the rest intervals between the running intervals on a speed run day as a viable part of your training and a valuable part of your training and an absolutely essential part of your training, make sure you look at the rest days the same way. If you want to look at your rest days as longer recovery intervals, fine. You do whatever mental gymnastics you need to do the right thing. Just know, like I said at the beginning, the right thing to do is always a sign of strength. So, if you need a rest day, take the rest day. Because if you take the rest days you need, you'll be able to do what you want to do on the other days. Got it? Great. Fantastic. That's episode 58. And I am so very thankful that you listened. I'm so very thankful that you are subscribing to the podcast, rating and reviewing the podcast. Let me just say this now. Please, please, please subscribe on Spotify or Apple or whatever platform you listen to this on. It makes a big difference. It truly does. If you haven't rated the podcast yet, please give us a great rating. I'm suddenly speaking in like the third person here. That's bizarre. And leave a review if you feel like leaving a review. I would really appreciate that as well. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. Thank you for sending in the letters. I think we're going to do some mailbag next week. And hopefully I can get Coach Tammy, she's been super busy, to do another Mindset Minute next week. So yeah, episode 59 is going to be rocking. But thank you for being here for episode 58. Until next time, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and I'll meet you on the next starting line. Thank you so much for listening to Coach Bennett's podcast today. And if you're not already following or subscribed to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening, well, I really wish you would because it helps a lot. Also, check out the show notes because you'll find a link to Coach Bennett's newsletter, as well as all the social media sites that I'm on. Places like Threads and Facebook and Instagram and Mastodon and YouTube and even the artist formerly known as Twitter. Whatever that dumpster fire is called today, you'll find a link to it because I'm on there. Thank you so much again for listening, and until next time, take care of yourself.